I think Philadelphia has a couple of issues. So there's the personality thing between Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. And maybe it's up to A.J. or maybe it's up to Jalen to solve that problem. But then there's something bigger. Why does their offense, and Sims is right, I've heard Sims talk about this for a couple of years now, even a few years. He has been critical of their offensive scheme. Last year, he was critical. They won the Super Bowl. He was critical of their offensive scheme. Said it's very simple. Why is it so simple? Hey, why is their formula, hey, we're just going to run the ball and take a few shots? Is that the right approach? I think it's fair to say, or it's fair to question how they're doing things. They don't score a lot of points. They got A.J. Brown. They got Devontae Smith. They got Saquon Barkley. They have good tight ends. They have a good offensive line. Why have you decided that this is the way that you have to win games? And you asked about Philadelphia. That's why my eyebrows went up when you said, hey, when does Philadelphia question? Philadelphia is always ready to question. I love that fan base. They are always ready for a fight, always ready to call you out. So I think it may start. I think it starts right now. Morning Drive. WIP. It started already, I'm sure, the questions for Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, because if you can bank on anything, it's a win over the Giants. They had lost 8 straight games in the division, the second longest streak of that kind in franchise history. It was the longest streak for any team of futility in its own division. And it wasn't a fluke last night. That's the thing. It wasn't like the Titans-Cardinals weird little kickball football gods. Somehow a touchdown was delivered to the Titans to help them win the game. This was just an ass-kicking. And from the first time the Giants had the ball, the Giants bowed up and they held the Eagles to 3 on that opening drive that felt like it was going to be a touchdown. And it was so funny because, and I don't want to call her out, but, it looked early on like it was going to be the Eagles' night. And Shereen Williams texted on the PFT writers thread, it's going to be a long night for the Giants. And then within 5 minutes, she said, it's going to be a long night for the Eagles. Because once they stopped them and held them to 3 and then right down the field, 7 points, and then another touchdown after they stopped the Eagles without scoring on their second drive. They established themselves and they maintained it. And the Eagles didn't give up, but it fell apart offensively in the second half. And it really does get to the point where it's almost like they're using a random play generator for offense.
Yeah.
There's not even the Madden suggestions. It's just a random play generator. And it doesn't, other than the tush push, which we need to discuss at some point. The tush push, they know. They know when to activate that. But 1st and 10, 2nd and 7, 3rd and 8, I don't know. Sometimes it feels like they just spin a wheel. And it's mainly on the early downs. When you're in an obvious passing down. It's those early downs where it doesn't seem that there's an overarching strategy, identity, as A.J. Brown said. And that's a problem. And how hard is that? When us schleps on the outside can see it, how is it so hard to see it from the inside? And maybe when you're in the middle of the blender, maybe it does make it harder because you're too busy dealing with all the personalities and all the issues and all the stress and all the pressure. And sometimes you got to jump out of the blender to understand what the ingredients are. I don't know if that metaphor works, but it's the best I could do on an early Friday morning. But I feel like you're too close to it sometimes if you're one of the coaches or any of the coaches to figure out what needs to be done.
I think you're exactly right. They've had too many voices in Jalen Hurts' ear in the last few years offensively. If you think about it, they've been so successful. They won a lot of games. They've been to a couple of Super Bowls. You wouldn't think they'd have so many offensive directions, so many offensive twists and turns in that time. Now, let me see if I can keep up here. You mentioned connect the dots. I'm going to try to follow the bouncing ball. It started off with Nick Sirianni. Nick Sirianni was a play caller, play designer. Then Nick Sirianni, I think midway through his first year, gives up play calling. He's still a play designer, but he gives up play calling. We give it to Steichen. Steichen takes him to the Super Bowl. They lose Steichen. They turn it over to Brian Johnson. They were not happy with Brian Johnson. They go through a losing streak that almost cost Nick Sirianni his job. He brings in new coordinators. Now you get Kellen Moore. Now Kellen Moore goes to New Orleans. Now you got a new coordinator. It's a lot for a team that has been successful. So I think you're right. They're so close to it because they keep, let's do this one. Let's do this one. It's almost like they need a sabbatical. They can't have it. They need like a year sabbatical to stand back and figure out who are we going to be offensively. You don't have that luxury in the NFL, but I think that's part of their problem. They've had so many different directions in the last few years. It's just hard to settle down and say, hey, this is who we need to be. They do not have it's not an imaginative scheme by any stretch. And it seems like they've got so much, their talent, they've got more, the talent supersedes the kind of mundane scheme that they have. You feel like you should be getting more out of what they have.
And here's what's unusual. And this is a criticism that Sims has levied against Aaron Glenn, the first-year coach of the Jets. He's not running the defense. He's not calling the defense. That's the horse that brung him to the party. We see all the time, whatever your specialty is that earns you those head coaching interviews and ultimately secured for you one of the top jobs in the National Football League. You come to the table with a specialty, and you need to lean into and continue to own that specialty. I mean, could you imagine having the conversation that the Vikings under Kevin O'Connell, every year they have a different offensive coordinator and it completely turns the offense on its head? No, it's his offense. It's his offense. He's got a coordinator in name, but it's his offense. When the Chiefs coordinators leave, and there was that pipeline there for a while until nobody, for whatever reason, didn't want to hire Eric Bieniemy, but it was Doug Peterson, it was Matt Nagy. He's creating these coaches who, Brad Childress when he was in Philadelphia, unfortunately for the Vikings. But it never changes the Andy Reid offense. That's what's weird about this. And I don't know if Nick Sirianni, like if somebody gave him advice that you got to morph into coach of the whole team, so don't be involved in the offense. Like the offense shouldn't be changing as much as it is when you do this flip-flop where you either hire a coordinator who's so good that you lose him after a year, or you hire him so bad you fire him after a year. It's the damnedest thing.
Right.
They either hire a guy that's so good that he's gone, or they hire a guy that they can't wait to get rid of. But through it all, where's Nick Sirianni? Because he's an offensive guy. It should be his offense. It shouldn't be, oh, well, Jalen Hurts has had 5 different offenses. He's had one head coach. It should be the same offense. That's what doesn't make sense. It never even hit me that way until this morning. These shouldn't be an issue.
I think the difference here's it all changed last year. I think last year kind of changed everything because with Andy Reid's job has never in Kansas City, his job has never been questioned. He's never been on the hot seat in Kansas City. So it's Andy Reid, and whether Doug Peterson is there as the offensive coordinator, whether it's Eric Bieniemy, Matt Nagy, it's still Andy Reid firmly in place, top down. It starts with Andy and then everybody else. Well, Nick Sirianni kind of had to sing for his supper in 2024. And he had no choice. Either you bring in some new coordinators or, okay, you're out. So Vic Fangio on defense, Kellen Moore on offense, and you are the CEO. And I wonder if that carryover, you won the Super Bowl. You won the Super Bowl with that formula. Fangio's still there, but Kellen Moore is gone. Did you gain any leverage by winning the Super Bowl? Can you kind of dip back into those waters and say, okay, now I won the Super Bowl. Everything's calmed down. I know you were about to fire me after 2023. I was a little shaky, but in 24, we win the Super Bowl. So can I take over the offense again? It is a tricky thing. I know what you're saying about leaning into your expertise, but then there's an argument for, well, if you lean into that side of the ball, but you are the head coach of the entire team, you really have to have an understanding, a grasp of everything that's going on. Maybe you should just be the big picture guy and let your assistants and let your coordinators get into the weeds, because you got to see the whole picture. I can see both sides of it.
It's been the damnedest thing to try to figure out for the Philadelphia Eagles because the results are there. They've won a Super Bowl, and they've been to 2. There's still franchises that haven't sniffed a Super Bowl. They've been to 2 in the last 3 years, and they've won 1. But, I mean, think back to the end of the 2024 season. Week 18, Sunday Splash. Teams are interested in trading for Kevin O'Connell, who's only under contract for 1 more year with the Minnesota Vikings, said Jay Glazer. Well, Nick Sirianni was only under contract for 1 more year with the Eagles. Why aren't teams trying to trade for him? He finished like 14th in the Coach of the Year voting last year, and they won the Super Bowl. And it's not like they were 9-8 and caught fire. They were good last year. So there's just something going on. And is it the talent? Is it the talent? And is the talent diminished enough that the coaching can't make up for it? When the talent's great, there isn't much coaching needs to do. You can run basic schemes, meat and potatoes, doesn't matter. We're going to kick your ass. We're better than you. We're better players across the board than you. Other teams catch up a little bit. Maybe it takes, and I don't want to be critical of Nick Sirianni because he won the freaking Super Bowl.
He won the Super Bowl, and Mike, his record, I've mentioned this before, his record against the high-profile coaches is outstanding. His record against LaFleur and Dan Campbell and Kyle Shanahan and McVay is off the charts. I think it's 10-3, something crazy, 10-3, 11-3, against some of the best coaches and Andy Reid. Against some of the best coaches in football, he's got a sterling record. So it's not that he doesn't know what he's doing, but there's something that is blocking the Eagles. They're blocked. They're not, this year, they are not playing to their talent. And maybe it's maybe we're overthinking it. Maybe it's what all Super Bowl teams go through. Remember that stat? We always used to use that stat before Kansas City kept going back to Super Bowls. But before Kansas City, it was that, hey, once you get to the Super Bowl and you lose it, or even if you win it, the Super Bowl hangover is real. It's hard to get back there. Maybe they're just dealing with, hey, you're Super Bowl champions. We're ready for you. You're not going to sneak up on anybody. We're going to play our best game against you, and you better have it together if you expect to be successful. Maybe they're just dealing with the weight of the crown.
Well, something is clearly off, and I saw some of Nick Sirianni's press conference last night, and his attitude is, we've been here before. We were 4-2 last year. Got here in a different way. Yeah, they were 4-2. They won the 6th game last year. They didn't lose it. They had the bad loss week 4 in Tampa, 33-16, and then last night bookends that, 34-17. But it feels worse because it's a little deeper into the season, and it comes at a time where there's this growing storm of discontent about the performance of the offense. And his attitude is, we just got to get back to work. And I feel like if your attitude is, we just got to get back to work, you may be missing the point. You got to find a way to jump out of the blender with these couple of extra days. Do some self-scouting, do some critical self-analysis, and figure out what you need to do differently, and hope you can implement some changes before you face the Vikings in Minnesota week 7. And this is one of the fascinating things about the NFL, because these changes are literally akin to changing the tire on a moving car. How are you going to implement real change during a season from one game to the next when it's clearly needed? And I don't think it's as simple as, we've been here before. We need to what? That's the thing. How do you finish that sentence? We need to do what we did last year. Well, okay, but what you did last year isn't happening. You can't just start groping for the light switch. Well, if we could just do what we did last year, okay, fine. but you haven't done it yet through 6 games. You haven't looked like the team that you were last year. You've been pulling wins out of the bunghole. You were adopting that Chiefs vibe, right? You weren't dominating anyone. Yeah. The most dominant team I've seen this year is the Colts. The Colts are the only team, and the Lions. The Colts are the only team that kicked the shit out of the lesser opponents. The other great teams are playing with their food. And maybe they're not playing with their food intentionally. Maybe the food's a little spicy. Maybe Pete Rozell's vision from 50 years ago finally is coming to fruition.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.